Hello, my name is Tanya, Holistic Cancer Wellness Guide, here with Power Pantaloons. And today we have with us Dr. Christina Feldman. Did I say it right?
Velderman, yeah.
Velderman, I almost. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here.
So tell us what you do, please.
Sure. I'm a doctor of classical Chinese medicine, and I particularly specialize in helping folks who feel sick or spiritually disconnected, most especially those who identify as being creative or sensitive, high achiever types, to reclaim their wellness and in the process to fall in love with life again. And that's my practice. We're looking at sort of elemental alchemy in the clinic. And I work with all of classical Chinese medicine. So that's acupuncture, herbs, Qigong, internal martial arts, Tai Chi, nutrition therapy, all of the modalities that fall under the umbrella of Chinese medicine. That's my work. And so that's me.
That's fantastic. So I could see a lot of ways where Chinese medicine would help somebody who's going through a cancer journey.
Mhm.
So where would you start if the oncologist is saying that we have to stay away from herbs?
I
But
would
they're
start
gonna
by
say that.
Yeah, some of them are going to say that. It
Yes.
really depends on where you are and what doctor you're working with. Now, I think it's really important when we look at integrative medicine that we don't get into a space where we have competing practitioners, because that doesn't help anyone.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
so there are two types of patients typically who come seeking support from Chinese medicine when they're going through a cancer experience. There's the folks that are working with an oncologist and are looking for extra support in managing the symptoms, going through, radiation therapy or surgery or whatever it is you're experiencing. And then there are some folks that have made the choice for themselves that they're not interested in conventional medicine and they want to pursue a different journey. And so what we would be able to do to help really depends on the individual's goals. Um, such an such an important piece for those of us, particularly in the classical lineage of Chinese medicine, is the idea that each of us is here on our own spirit curriculum and spirit journey. And so we believe there's no such thing as an incurable illness, but there is an incurable attitude, if you will. and and so that's where, I say I'm not here to tell you what to do, but we can support you in whichever direction you're wanting to go with your journey. So for those of us like it from my program, for my doctorate, it's an integrative clinical doctorate. I can interface and work well with whatever, restrictions are sort of put in place with your primary care physician or your oncologist or whoever you've appointed as sort of the lead of your health team. Or if that's not the journey that you're on, as long as we've had that conversation and you understand, really the choice that you're making, then we can support you with all of the methodology that's available inside classical Chinese medicine.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I absolutely agree with you on attitude. Attitude, your mindset really does define the entire journey for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it makes every difference in, and not to say, and not to preach toxic positivity either, because that's really harmful as well. But there's a
Yes.
matter of, I would almost say, like believing in yourself and your own capacity to transform, your own capacity to change and to move through this journey and the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys of this life experience that your spirit came here to have. And
Yeah.
so looking at, like what is healing and that piece of it. And so much of it involves releasing resistance to what's real for you right now. And that includes all the negative and, the fear and the difficulty and all of that that comes with being deeply, deeply unwell. And
Yeah.
also holding that kernel of hope and that belief in yourself and that faith in spirit and that there's a purpose behind your journey. If you allow that unfolding, there doesn't have to be, you can choose not to have that. That's everybody has their own choice.
Yes. Accepting somebody's choice when they make that choice and loving them enough to respect that it's their choice. And if they're ready to go, all you can do is kiss them and tell them you love them and let them go. Um,
Absolutely. That's
yeah,
the inherent
it's hard.
sovereignty. dignity of each spirit. And it is hard because we want what we want for each other and for the people we love. And yet,
Right. But if they're not living optimally, like quality versus quantity, it is a decision that each individual gets to make for themselves, hopefully. Sometimes selfish family members try to take that away. And that I think is horrible beyond words, when you make your wishes known to your family and they decide they want to be selfish. That's I just I have a problem with that. I really do. It gets me it gets
it's
me
so
worked up.
I'm sure. And, it's so hard in our culture because we don't honor the the concept of a soul curriculum. We don't honor the struggles in life. We're terrified of illness. And beyond that, we are absolutely to our core petrified of death and transition and what's beyond. And so we do everything in our power to avoid it, from our like youth idolizing culture to our constant obsession with not aging to, the things we choose to talk about and look at, and our terror and our avoidance of this puts it in a really, really charged space, so that people even have a hard time just having these conversations. And then if you say, well, I embrace that, I'm not scared, I'm not scared of what's on the other side, I'm looking forward to the next step in my spiritual journey, then people are like, well, there's something wrong with you, you must be crazy, and now we need to take your choice away from you because we know better, because they're really plugged into that cultural fear and that story.
Yes, absolutely. As a society, we're pretty bad there. But I'm seeing a global conscious shifting
Hmm.
and more individuals across the board are accepting a holistic approach to wellness because I'm adamant about the fact that it's mind, body, spirit. You like if there's something wrong in the spirit, it can manifest physically and cause you issues until you figure out what it is and deal with that. And that involves some shadow work and exploring yourself and looking at the ugly stuff, whether you were an active participant or a passive participant in it, like whether you were at all to blame or not, it doesn't matter. You still have to look at it, go through the muck, do the work, and elevate your vibration.
Absolutely. And very much classical Chinese medicine agrees with what you just said. As we look at the Wang Jine Jing, the Yellow Emperor's classic of internal medicine, it was written almost 3,000 years ago. And chapter 52 tells us that all disease is rooted in the spirit. And so we've had this knowing for thousands of years, and all medicine has its origin originally in shamanic practice, in spiritual practice and natural science, through observation and, sort of case study trials, trying and observing, sharing information across cultures and communities. And that included the spiritual information. That this idea, the Western world and sort of Western philosophy is very binary, and it bifurcated the physical and the spiritual a long time ago. And so our society has gone down that road. And yet we have the sickest in the United States. We have the sickest society in the world. We have the most expensive healthcare in the world. We have a literal epidemic of depression, of anxiety, of people. Your average person that I see in clinic is on at least 8 different medications, typically for physical issues and then also for psychological issues, and then medicines to manage the side effects of the other medicines, without ever getting down to
Yes,
the root of, why do you feel horrible? Why don't you love your life? Why don't you feel joy in your body? Whatever it looks like, that doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. And so we've really lost the plot in our culture in terms of how do we actually create a vibrant life worth living? Because if we don't have that, illness is guaranteed. If we don't have that wellness inside myself and my upright chi, my spirit, my psychology, you could call it if you wanted, you're going to not be well. It's pretty much guaranteed that way, and it just manifests for all of us in different ways. But we see it across our entire culture right now. We are in an absolute state of crisis, on a
yes,
medical level, on a wellness level in our communities, and the current solutions aren't addressing that.
not at all. They're sitting in the corner avoiding it at all possible. Like, and it doesn't make any sense to me. And it hasn't made any sense to me that when you go in for an issue, they only address the symptom and not try to locate the issue. And I think part of it is just how the uh um medical container itself, like the whole container itself, is built that way. And nobody wants to rattle the cage. Nobody wants to think outside the box. Nobody wants to look at the evidence that this isn't working, that we need to start from the beginning, from that to the insurance companies dictating how care should be applied, even though they're not actually seeing the patient,
Yeah.
and that it's capitalistically rooted. And then you add big pharma in, and if the patient is well, they're not making any money, so they're not really trying very hard to make the patient well. They're only trying to mitigate the symptoms. And until something is done to correct all of that, we're going to continue down this horrible road.
Yeah, and this was a deliberate construct that was actually created in the United States. As we look at, there was a national health symposium that took place in the early 1900s, and it was sponsored by several very, very wealthy families, surprising no one, right? And so
Surprising
the
no one.
idea was
JP Morgan Chase,
we're going to
the
define what is
Rockefellers.
real medicine and what is not. And the way they defined that, because of the companies they had, was that real medicine was anything that relied on technology and pharmaceuticals. And alternative medicine was anything that didn't. And so that was a split that happened. And then we had, because of that bifurcation, again, in the United States in particular, all of the schools started teaching into that model. All of the care started, all the marketing, the messaging, all of this moved into that model. So the idea became essentially, if you're not paying someone to buy their product, you can't get well. And there's no way to do it. And now that's nonsense. And Western medical doctors know it too. And I want to be really clear about it. Most of them, many of them, are just as frustrated and
Yes.
extremely disheartened by this system that they're being forced to practice medicine in. But all of their training has been pushing them in this direction, which is why groups like the American Holistic Medical Association are so, so important. And the founder of that group just put out a book. She is 102 years old and still a practicing medical doctor. And her book is called The Life Well Lived, and it's 5 or 6 secrets from to a wonderful life from a 102-year-old doctor. And what's amazing to me is so much of what she's talking about in that book are the same types of concepts that are treated as sort of like woo woo or out there, when it's the same thing that's being said from so-called alternative practitioners or from what I would call traditional medicines. And she talks about that a good deal, that she's like, I'm not airy fairy, I'm an MD. I do this. I do vaccines. I practice, scientific medicine. And here's what the science really shows us, because it doesn't actually point us in the direction of use more and more expensive technology and more pharmaceuticals for the vast majority of illnesses. The vast majority of the distress we experience just doesn't need that.
I absolutely agree. And when that symposium happened, and that at that time we did have herbal schools, and that was how we were healing at that time.
Yeah.
And they did a vast disservice to our entire nation by doing that. And the fighting now about trying to allow herbalists and alternative practitioners to have the rights to do it, we keep being met with restrictive laws, how we're allowed to refer to things like diagnoses. We can't use them because then we're practicing medicine without a license. And it yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah, and it's particularly hard for Western herbalists. That's a very nice thing being in the Chinese medicine context is that we can diagnose, I have a clinical doctorate and we do diagnose, but not with Western terminology. We have our
Right.
own complete system of medicine and our own complete herbal system, which can include Western herbs, but it's very different from Western herbalism. The theory behind it is quite different, but it's complementary at the same time. And
Yes.
I'd absolutely love to see a branching out and inclusion of more training for Western herbalists, like with the herbal guilds and
Yeah.
bringing kind of more raising those standards up because it is true. And it's true in every profession. There are people who are out there, diagnosing who don't have the appropriate training for what they're saying. And there are
Yes.
people who have all the training in the world and are being told they can't practice and help people. So we have to find, what is that in between place? And I don't ever want to say, let's get more government involved. But somehow there has to be like either within each industry, some way of saying these are standards where we say this is a safe person to work with. And we can show you that this person has met those standards in some way.
Yeah, there should be some sort of standardization, and it's difficult because if as a layperson, if you want to go find somebody to help you with herbs, you have no idea what their credentials are, like at all. And there's nothing. I mean, they could tell you whatever they want
Yeah.
because there is no standardization. So I agree with you. Not that I want more government regulation, but it's a thing that
Having
might.
just gone through my relicensing process and grumbling about it, I was like, right, this is so much work when we get the government involved in everything. But there's also
Yeah.
something to be said for, if you come see someone like me, I've had to pass national board exams just like an MD. I've had to keep up with continuing education. I'm licensed in every state I practice in, that is helpful for people. So I'd love to see a mechanism, hopefully one that's accessible, but a mechanism of some kind for Western practitioners as well, who are in, these more traditional medicine modalities.
Yes, it would be amazing. And I think most of the Western uh, herbalists agree for the most part. Some of them are a little wild and woolly, but for the most part, I think that we want something that creates a standard so that we're protected and the people that we help are protected because that's really what it's all about is the people that you're helping on their wellness journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is great.
Yeah, and I can go on and on about this stuff all day because that's like where acupuncturists are known for being in battles these days, which I mostly stay out of. I'm a clinician and a writer and a teacher, and that's what I focus on. But there are folks out there doing a lot of really good work trying to expand public access right now to medical choice
Yeah.
and to having the confidence that the people you're working with are telling you the truth, that they're operating within the scope of their training, within, their lineage. Because like you said, there's some wild and woolly people out there in Western herbalism. And I'll be honest, there's some real out there folks in the Chinese medicine world as well. And that's a challenge, for those who are really rooted down in the science of this medicine. And there is a spirit science of the medicine. So that doesn't mean we're not engaging on the energetic level. That's real. And it is extraordinarily effective. And the best practitioners operate at that level, also using all the available data we have. It doesn't actually contradict. That was one of the most interesting turnarounds for me going through the 5-year process to become a doctor of this medicine. When I first went into school, I was very anti-Western medicine. I had had a very long illness myself. I had been diagnosed with multiple incurable illnesses. I was completely disabled and I was very angry, to be candid. I was so angry at these doctors who had been gaslighting me and telling me all these things, and then eventually telling me, you can take these drugs for the rest of your life and that's it. You're just never going to get better. And so I had a lot of anger at Western medicine and Western science when I first started, because I wanted to be well again. And I did get well. And I did reverse those incurable illnesses. And what I learned in the course of getting an integrative clinical doctorate was that actually Chinese medicine and the spirit science and that aspect of it agrees with the Western science. We're just talking about it with different language in a different thought framework, where the Western world is very binary and we say it focuses on form. In the Taoist thought, in the Chinese medicine thought, we focus on function and we think in cycles and spirals and circles. And it's very different. And learning it, it felt like it was like tearing my brain apart and then putting it back together again. But once you can learn both systems and translate between them, they agree. They just about like sort of what is real, but fundamentally we see it, we perceive it differently. And so we're going to approach those systems and how we can interface with and change them in different ways. Now, there are times that it's 100% appropriate. You should go see a Western doctor. You should go get the pharmaceutical. You should take advantage of the billions of dollars that have been spent developing this miraculous technology that we have today.
Yes.
Absolutely. And there are so many times where it's completely unnecessary. And it's actually, in my estimation, what I've seen working with my patients in clinic is that it really can get in our way because it takes away. There's this idea in a lot of Asian thought that if you take away someone's pain, you take away their ability to learn, because our pain is a teacher. Our symptoms are our body and spirit screaming at us for attention.
Yes.
And that we have an opportunity to come back into alignment if we listen to that, if we actually engage in that conversation, which is going to be, as you said before, like confrontive and painful and shadow work and a lot of different things. It's not fun. And yet when you do that, that's transformative. Taking a pharmaceutical is not transformative. It doesn't change anything. It just makes you not feel the message that is your symptoms. And that's preventing us from finding our actual innate power to heal and to change and completely transform our lives and be aligned with spirit.
Yes to all of that. Absolutely. Amazing. You said it very eloquently, and I absolutely agree. The pain part, like it's our body telling us more directly because it's been trying to tell us for a long time, and we've just ignored it blissfully with our blinders on, just and so our body has to be more dramatic because it wants to be well. And so we need to listen to what our body is telling us and respond accordingly instead of ignoring it. You'll be
Yeah.
much happier, much faster if you.
Yeah. And so much of it, and part of where it is deeply challenging is that we all, we believe in, again, in Taoist thought, that we come in with a life curriculum, and that is imprinted on our spirit that inhabits this body. And we actually receive that when your mother is at 3 months gestation inside your grandmother. That's when your blueprint is created inside that little egg.
Yeah.
And because that embryo, your mom, that's when she has all of her eggs are formed while she's gestating inside your grandma. So we have this like intergenerational connection to our individual blueprint. And then through our lifetime, though, we are born into a particular culture, into a particular family that teaches us, regardless of your blueprint, this is who you're supposed to be. And you're going to be punished if you don't behave that way. If you don't think that way, you're going to be shamed. You're going to be told to get into line and be a particular type and sort of person. And because we as humans, we're not meant to be like individual solo creatures. That's not how we evolved. That's not how we survived as a species. We survive because we exist in community and we're cooperative. And so one of the ways we all learned survival very young was to actually ignore ourselves, was to ignore that inner knowing of our truth, of our upright chi and our spirit's calling, in order to placate the culture and people and communities around us. And it's not like this is done with malintent, but it's how we've all learned. And so when you've been brought up your whole life to ignore what you feel, to ignore what you see, to just, like you said, put those blinders on and just go down this road, that's what we're going to do. That's what we've been trained to do our whole lives. And yet that's pulling us away from our actual truth. And that is going to manifest in illness. And then, because we've been taught, rub some dirt on it, suck it up, just keep going. That's what we're going to do. We're going to ignore it. We're going to think, oh, my body's just being a problem, like it's a nuisance to solve, rather than realizing there's a fundamental disconnect between the way I'm showing up in my life and the way my spirit and my body and my mind need me to be showing up in my life in order for this entire beautiful system that is my person to be at harmony with itself. Because fundamentally, when we're pretending to be something we're not, when we're pretending to think what we've been told we should think, to feel what we think we should feel, rather than our own actual truth, that poisons our chi. It poisons us on a deep, deep level. And that eventually manifests for everyone.
Yeah, it makes our temple dirty.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us are a little bit better at ignoring societal norms than others, even from a young age. And I always, my mom always was like, "You just off beating your own drum over there, doing whatever you want, really not caring what society says." And I mean, I do care, like because I'm part of society, but there's always been that sort of joyful little rebel running around, like, and then she's still here, doing the crazy stuff, and it's
Do you
fun,
think
right?
was that a big part for you of your journey to wellness? Did you feel like there was like a sloughing off component of letting go of old beliefs or ideas?
It was a lot. So, like, listening to your body, like I listened to my body to get diagnosed. There was nothing in my pap smear. It came back regular or inconclusive. Blood work came back fine. Ultrasound, transvaginal ultrasound, all came back fine. They did this test where they inflated my uterus with saline and then imaged it.
Mm-hmm.
I do not recommend this test. It was so horrible. That came back inconclusive, and my gynecologist, she was like, "Well, the only thing left that we can do is a D&C. A healthy uterus is 4 ounces. When they removed mine, it was over 10 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
10 pounds of cancer.
Yeah.
And so the year there, like from diagnosis to being done with treatment was almost a year. And then at that time, it was okay, so the very core of my femininity tried to murder me. And then there was a very long process. I think it was about 5 years where I rediscovered my femininity, my true womanness, or whatever you want to call it, like my personhood. And that was a long, painful process, figuring out how to operate in this body that tried to kill me. Was It was not easy. It was not easy. Here, 16 years later, I can look back on this journey and be grateful for the fact that I was diagnosed, because it radically changed who I was. There is a healing, mind, body, and spirit. There was a healing. I'm a kinder, more compassionate person, have much more gratitude than I did before. We're going to be honest, I may have been a little selfish. And like that process, like that was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. And the reason that I do this is so that I can help others go through this kind of process, maybe less brutally. even if it's just a skosh less brutal than what I had to go through, then I'm fulfilling my life's purpose.
Yeah. And that's so, and thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey. And that's is so very true with any type of serious illness, whether it's cancer or another diagnosis, is that there is a falling apart that has to happen there. And I talk about this as the waves and the rhythms of the Tao, because it's constant in our lives. We see it all the time. Things fall apart and come together differently, fall apart and come together differently. And when we are confronted with illness that's literally threatening our survival, we still have a choice. We can continue to wear those blinders and just let ourselves go into death and decline, or we can embrace and literally dive in and ask spirit to carry us as we let all of it fall apart so it can reform around that pure core that is at the essence of our being. And you were talking about that, like connecting back to your femininity, which is so fractured in our culture, the yin that we discuss, and that honoring of the yin and the sacredness and the power of the yin part of ourselves. So many women are deeply, deeply wounded with regards to femininity in our culture.
Yes, from the minute we're born, we're put in seductive clothing. We're forced to look at ads where women are 100 pounds, and we're told that that's healthy and that's what we should strive for. We're made to go home from school because our shoulders are showing, and we're distracting just by being. It's
Yeah.
so embedded in our culture. I'm not surprised at all that millions of women are hurting, and I do. There's a global conscious shifting, and I see a transformation. I see a reclaiming of sacredness for women
Yes.
as a community. I like, you can
Yes.
see it in just how conversations are. You can see it in how in social media, just everywhere you can see it. We're done with being treated as second class individuals, and we're not putting up with it anymore. We have all put our foot down sort of simultaneously, and it's causing a little bit havoc over there in the patriarchy, but that's okay.
And it will, because, we say so easily, let everything fall apart. It's not fun. It doesn't
No,
feel good. The cure almost always hurts worse than the illness. And yet it's literally destined to happen. We look at yin and yang, at these forces of masculine, feminine, of energetic versus receiving or containing or holding, of light versus dark. And we have been for quite some time now in where yang was becoming ascendant and has been ascendant. And if you imagine that Tai Chi symbol, the yin and yang symbol that people are familiar with, what that actually shows is the inevitable intertransformation of yin and yang. They're not oppositional, they transform into each other. One does not exist without the
yeah,
other. And so because yang has been so ascendant, you see that white that reaches up, and then you see the little black dot in the center. That is the yin that always exists within the yang. And that yin is coming into force, which will then bring more ascendancy of that yin energy. There's always going to be this shift and this movement and slide between the two, because that's we see it all throughout nature. Yin and yang always intertransform into one another. And so it had to happen. It needs to happen. It is happening. And
yeah,
it's an amazing moment. Chaos is it's a little crazy to live through, but it's exciting if we let it be. We can see the opportunity and the healing that comes inside the fracturing that we're currently seeing is creating the only way to create the space for us to actually come back together in a more balanced fashion.
yes. And the planet needs for us to do it now, before we hit. I think we like where we are on the tipping point, that's debatable, and I'll let the scientists argue that out. But we're close if we have not already gone over. And yay capitalism. Uh, but
Yeah.
I agree, and I see that as a pendulum. Like it goes back and forth, and that's how I always view it in my mind.
Mhm.
And we have been way over here on the right, and it's time for us to go over to the left, and it's going to be a big old swing.
Yeah. And it's exciting to see, as we open space, how will we step forward and who will step forward and be willing to brave the rigors of leadership, to be willing to brave being on that front line of change, because it's not easy, and the minute you take a strong stance, strength invites challenge. And so it's something that has been difficult historically for women, the way we've been entrained in our society right now, is that we're not supposed to stand our ground. We're supposed to defer to others. It's not nice to be a leader. It's not nice to be ambitious. It's not nice. Like, who cares? The yin isn't always nice. It doesn't have to be. The yin is powerful and strong, like a mama bear, like a mountain, like a forceful ocean. The ocean is the giver of all life on this planet. And with all due respect, if you don't respect that ocean, it will drown you in a second without thinking about it. That is the power of yin. And we have that. So I'm so excited about those who are stepping forward and taking this opportunity, seeing the space, and allowing that courage to rise up, to
Yeah.
have voice in this time.
Yes. Yes. It's very powerful, and it's majestic to watch. It's just amazing to see who's stepping forward and taking those leadership roles. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if you can hear my little doggy crying in the background. I'm sorry if you can.
I can't.
Okay, good.
Maybe our listeners do, but
If anyone hears a strange noise, I'm not ignoring a small child. It's my little dog throwing a temper tantrum.
throwing a very quiet temper tantrum, way quieter than my puppies.
Oh, good.
Oh, Christina, this has been absolutely a beautiful talk. Is there a way for our audience to get in touch with you?
Absolutely, yeah. You can find me online at my website at soulfiremedicine.com. You can also find me on Facebook and YouTube, and I do put some videos out there. And if you're interested in learning about how to connect if you're interested in working one-on-one, either in person or at a distance, that's available on my website at soulfiremedicine.com. And anyone coming from this podcast, if you want to sign up for a 20-minute discovery call, I'll go ahead and give that to you for free as a gift just for coming from this space. If you're not ready for one-on-one type work right now, I also have a wellness program, Elemental Alchemy, and that program gets you access to a self-paced course that's all online, taking you through modules in mind, body, and spirit around practices to help you build wellness and transformation in your life. And then we have an online group where you can connect with other people and get support, and also weekly office hours where I teach for typically about 30 minutes every week, going through the elemental energies that we're in from week to week to week, as those shift throughout the year in the context of the 5 elements, and then answering any questions. There's a live back and forth there. So any questions or need for support that come up from folks in the group, you can post them ahead of time, or we can answer them. You can post them in comments as we're on the call live. And so that's all available. You can check that out on my website if my energy resonates with you today.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I will make sure to put your website information in the show notes so people can find you.
Thank
And as always, I also have a gift. The 2 essential oils that I used while I was going through chemotherapy every day. And that will also be in the show notes. I really appreciate everybody tuning in. And thank you and good night.
Thank you so much.